Well, first of all, just acknowledging that having an argument is not disastrous. First of all, it indicates a desire to address things or at least communicate in some way. We're not indifferent. The opposite of love is not anger, it's indifference. So they're not checked out, they're trying to desperately address something, okay? And often, they don't have the right technique or tools, but those are learned skills, okay? So just acknowledging that there's not something fatally flawed here, but perhaps their technique needs some work, or there are things to learn about how to communicate better.
And actually, it does mean that they trust each other enough to admit that they disagree, because, honestly, sometimes not rocking the boat doesn't. Now, for Ron and I, we were in that category when we married, partially because our parents fought and we wanted to avoid conflict, right? And we were very fortunate to learn skills very early on, okay? But the tendency was to avoid conflict, but it takes trust to admit that you disagree. So, it's a given that you're going to have different opinions. You are each unique and unrepeatable. No one is the same. That's a given, okay? But what you do with those different opinions, can be learned. And what we've learned is that this atmosphere of being in love is so precious to us and so powerful that we don't want to destroy that. So the challenge is, how do we come together on an issue while still safeguarding that precious atmosphere of being in love? And so we've learned to do that. We have a couple of different tools that we use. First of all, just getting the feelings out of the way, which we've already talked about, can be very helpful, and we tend to use a writing technique for that, which is quiet, But then to really understand, take for granted that there is some good in the other's way of doing things. I'll give you a perfect example, okay? When we were first married, this came up, and I think it's one of those adjusting to marriage things, right, is that Ron organizes his life in piles, all right? He has piles of papers everywhere, and I was a good little new wife and cleaning up, and there was this little pile of papers on his bureau, right? So, of course, I was going to clean, and I whisked them away, and when he came home, he was just fried. It rattled his cage. He was so upset.
This was incredibly disconcerting to me because all of my way of organizing my life had disappeared, and so Kathy got the message very clearly that that was not a good thing for her to do.
Now, to his credit, he didn't yell. As I said, we didn't raise our voices or argue with one another, but I could tell he was, not happy. So then I did what the culture would tell me to do. The conventional wisdom of the day is patience and tolerance, okay? Let's just tolerate that pile of papers that's on your bureau. But every time I looked in that room, I did not feel closer to Ron. Okay, it really didn't help us. And then one day, I really think it must have been the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, because I don't remember consciously thinking I'm going to do this. But one day, I said to Ron, "Oh, honey, what's the good behind keeping those papers there? There must be some good, or you wouldn't do it, right?"
I didn't even know how to answer the question because I had never thought about it. I had just done it sort of mechanically. It gave me a sense of comfort. But when I had to answer Kathy because she asked me a question, and so I thought about it, and I realized that these were things that needed attention. They were very important. I was worried that if they were out of sight, I would forget about them and I wouldn't address them. So just having them in sight gave me a sense of right order or peace, that I knew they would get attended to. They wouldn't get forgotten. And so it gave me a sense of security, seeing them in place.
Just telling me that helped, first of all. That was step number one. So you see what I did was I presumed the best, gave them the benefit of the doubt. There must be virtue, a good value behind doing what you're doing, okay? But then, even just saying that, I tell you what, when I walked in the room and I saw that pile, I thought, oh, poor Ronnie, he's worried about that. So that was a move in the right direction, okay? But then, it was really, Ron asked me why I like everything put away into the cupboards and cleared away. Well, that's the home I grew up in, number one, but also gives me a sense of right order and peace and no stress. When a room looks beautiful, right? And that's a very feminine perspective, right? I feel good.
Yeah, I could embrace Kathy's value because it was good there, and I didn't want her not to be feeling peaceful.
So very often the way we get at the value may be very different, but the values are good. And so we start there with embracing the value. And then a creative solution can come forward, not a compromise. Compromise is highly overrated. In compromise, nobody gets what they want, right? And there's resentment, or we did it your way last time or my way. So what what we've learned to do is to discern the best course of action that will bring us closer as a couple. And it takes a little listening and reflection, but it really is magical. And so we will think about it, and we each make decisions differently, and that has to be respected. We form our opinions differently. Ronnie's all about, analyzing data because he's a scientist, and, it takes him a while. And, I tend to prey on things and consult experts and stuff like that. But, whatever we do, we have an opinion that as adults has worked for us, right? And so we will write out our proposal of the best course of action. And it's a silent listening